system. My name is Jókay, I'll be your chair. Judging with me will be Petra. Considering that this is a panel of two, this means that I get the decisive vote and the chairperson's vote counts as two, but that doesn't mean in no case mean that Petra cannot be the dissenting judge of this debate, and the feedback later on will be done. Accordingly, I will be doing the timekeeping. Speeches are 8 minutes of length. First and last minute are protected from points of information. After the first minute, we will hear a bang on the table. This means that points of information cannot be offered. After the 7th minute, we hear another bang on the table, which means points can no longer be offered. I will also be timing you every individual minute, counting down in terms of how much time you still have left. And I will also be showing you the time signal for half a minute left. When the 8 minutes have passed, you will put another bang on the table, which means that your speech is now done. We tolerate about 15 seconds of additional time so you can conclude your thoughts. So by no means does a double bang mean that you have to stop mid-sentence and sit down. But do take into consideration that your time is done, so just to sum up your thoughts and to conclude your speech, and that's about it. At which point the judges stop taking notes and paying attention. And at one point you will also be asked to sit down if your speech goes to an extreme length. Having said that, do we have any questions? Then if we have no further questions, I would like to welcome the first speaker of the government to present his case.
Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to welcome the judges, the audience, and the opposition. First of all, I would like to introduce our team. Our second speaker is Eszter, who will also summarize our arguments. Our third speaker is Mozsár, Dani, and me, myself, and Balázs. Our motion today is that the House believes that the wages of professional sportsmen is immorally high. First of all, before I start, I would like to give definitions. The first definition I would like to give is a definition of sportsman. Sportsman is a person whose prior job is sport, doing sports, and does it on a high level and, of course, competitively. The second thing I want to give a definition of is wage. Wage is basically the salary, the money they get for their job. Now, the last thing I would like to give a definition of is immorally high. By immorally high, we think that it means that higher than the average salary in the country. No thanks. In the country. After that, we would also like to give a criteria, which by this motion, we are not talking about. No thanks. We're not talking about the pro sportsmen who don't get as much salary. We're talking about the sportsmen who actually get the salary that is mentioned in the motion. Now I would like to go on to our arguments. Our first argument that it is this salary that the sportsmen get is morally high.
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, would you grant everyone the same wage regardless of what they do?
Can you please repeat the question?
Sir, would you grant everyone the same wage regardless of the work that they do?
The last part. Please.
Regardless of the work that they do?
No, not quite. So back to our first argument. Our first argument that these sportsmen get a morally high wage compared, taking in the view that they don't do as much community purposes. They only do entertainment and they only inspire, rather than doing helping the community directly. And this is not worth as much as they get, especially the amount they get for this job, this inspiring and this entertainment.
So,
yes.
Actors and actresses also only do entertainment, and yet they receive far higher pays than people like social workers who give back to the community.
Can I question that or no? Not at all. Well, of course, but in this motion we talk about sportsmen. Okay, so now to our second argument. Our second argument is that sportsmen get way higher salaries than other people who do more help directly to the community. For example, firemen and doctors, just to state two. They do direct help, not only entertaining and inspiring. Usually they work more and they earn money with their hard work instead of their image. Our third argument is that they take away money. Now, this is a bit wide, that argument, now I'd like to get on to it. First of all, in many countries they get different taxes, which is a bit strange compared to what they earn. They also, the national teams, they get their travel fees paid by the government. And this takes away much money and doesn't give as much profit, of course. They also get free healthcare as well in many countries. They also get massage and all that. And with their medals, they also receive some money as well. Now, yes?
Sir, do you concede that not everyone can be a professional sportsman?
Well, of course not everyone can be professional sportsmen. So yeah, that's basically our three arguments that I would like to mention. So I would like to repeat the most important points now. First of all was the immorally high wage, taking a view that they don't do as much community purposes. Inside that we also mentioned that they do entertainment and inspiring rather than directly helping the community, which would be a bit more important. And they get so much money for this entertainment and inspiring. The second, which was also really important, is that they get way more money for their job compared to other people who directly help the community. These firemen, doctors, and policemen. And inside that we mentioned that they, of course, do direct help, as I said. And they do firemen and doctors do more work, and all these people who have the community directly. And these people, firemen and doctors, they earn their money with their work, not only their image. And our last but not least argument was that they take away money, for example, from the government, which pays the national team for their travel taxes, and they get in many countries free healthcare and different taxes. And this takes away way more money and it doesn't bring back as much profit. So this is why we think that the wages of sportsmen is immorally high, and there is something to be done. So yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
We thank the speaker for his speech and welcome the first speaker of the opposition to present their case.
Side opposition today believes that we stand for paying athletes how much they are worth. And the yardstick, because side opposition failed to provide one, the yardstick for this debate is who best firstly reflects the true value of sports, and secondly, who best empowers it for positive change. And to prove this, I'll be showing you two lines of argument. Firstly, how we reward sportsmen for their skills, and how we respect the legitimacy of the free market. My second speaker, Joshua, will then prove to you how we empower sports to promote human ideals that will directly clash with their first speaker's point that sportsmen do not produce any societal good. Moreover, let's look at what sportsmen really are in the contextualization. Sportsmen are paid a spectrum of wages. Not all sportsmen are paid like David Beckham standards of $40 billion, for instance. They are paid based on the level of talent and how much they contribute to the sport. Moreover, they're only good during a certain time period where they're truly valued, usually the age of 20 to 25. This demonstrates a very short shelf life in which there's the only opportunity for them to earn their income. But moreover, it is bad furthermore because there's a risk of injury. Often sportsmen take up, I'll take you in a minute, so often sportsmen take up roles that require them to get injured easily, and they put in high sacrifices, but they spend the bulk of their youth and childhood training specifically to achieve this role. And moreover, what does it mean for it to be immorally high? For it to be immorally high, it's not just for it to be above average wages. It needs to mean that it doesn't justify the contributions they make to society. This means that firstly, it cannot be it's not proportional to the sacrifices they make. Secondly, it doesn't reflect the nature and importance of their job. And thirdly, it doesn't reflect the skills of the employee. But what's wrong with the simple definition inside opposition case that is higher than average wages? Because by that logic, any individual that earns higher than average wage will be immoral. This means that the same fireman that they talk about needs to earn the same amount of money as the low-skilled worker working in the manufacturing industry. This means that the teacher that they hold to such high regard will have to earn the same amount of wages as the parents of the student she teaches. This is unfeasible, this doesn't take place in society. It might be a good idea to have, has proven to fail practically. But what does it mean for them to contribute to society? To contribute to society, now this is giving the point of rebuttal that sportsmen do not contribute to society because they, quote, only entertain and inspire. Firstly, we ask them, why is this unimportant? Inspiring individuals contributes to net positive growth to the economy. Sportsmen, if they claim, inspire individuals to work hard, persevere harder, we think that this in and of itself is a net gain to society. But moreover, we ask them, what exactly does it mean for you to be important to society, for you to be allowed to earn wages? They gave firemen, they gave teachers. We ask them, why are firemen and teachers so much more important? Just because they risk their lives. If a sportsman risks his life to entertain people, risks his future by risking sports injury, why is this sacrifice any less than their teachers or their firemen? But moreover, we can tell you that even if I'll take you, yes sir.
My question is, so do you think that sportsmen and firemen and people like that have the same value in society?
We don't think they have the same value. We think that every individual contributes to society in their own way. And I'll be showing you later on in my point on the free market how, in fact, these wages are determined by how much society values their contribution. But back to my point of rebuttal, even if we recognize that sportsmen only entertain and inspire, then we ask them, in their world, where do individuals like celebrities fit in? This is what Joshua asked them in their point of information, which is very much relevant to this debate. Is celebrities and producers only seek to entertain individuals in society. In their world, it's immoral to pay them as well. There'll be no movies, no books, because writers don't produce a net benefit to society. They're cutting out the majority of industries in society. They need to prove to us how they justify this. But moreover, they then got to a point on how we take money from the government because governments pay money to these individuals. Firstly, that is not true. More often than not, professional sportsmen belong to clubs, and these are the clubs that pay them. In the case where governments do provide healthcare and insurance, it's because the government provides to the entire society. They provide to the society in which they claim do not contribute. Even the members within society don't contribute. I'm going to be transiting on to my first point of substantive argument on rewarding sportsmen for the skill. And the thesis is that to be a professional athlete, large amounts of talent and skill are needed, which should be reflected in their wages. The premise for this point is that wages are based on talent. And this is true in society, where the most talented are often paid the most. Let's look at the three highest paying jobs in the majority of the world: lawyers, politicians, doctors. These are professions that require large amounts of money, large amounts of skill that is gained from many, many years studying how to perform in this profession. Society inherently recognizes that these individuals, because of their inherent skill and talent, should be paid more. However, at the same time, we acknowledge that while it might be unfortunate that white-collar workers with higher qualifications deserve higher pay than blue-collar workers who possess mostly technical skills, we inherently recognize it because the level of education, which presumably translates into capabilities, is rewarded in society in the status quo. But let's look at the nature of sports. Athletes train from a very, very young age. In China, their talent started at the age of 3. From that point of time, the limits are pushed all the way until they reach ages like 16 to 18. Their limits are pushed, they neglect education, they train literally 20-hour days. But even then, only 1 in 30 of these talents scouted become professional athletes. This is because China recognizes that not anyone can be professional sportsmen. There's a need for a mix of talent and perseverance, something that they recognize in their own substantive. Let's look at David Beckham, a famed sportsman, with a VO2 ratio 4 times that of normal human capacity, which reflects in his stamina, which reflects in his speed. Therefore, society inherently recognizes, because it is justified to pay proportional to the effort and skill, sportsmen require large amounts of effort and skill, it is therefore moral to pay them high wages. But in their case, they undermine sports as a celebration of talent because they refuse to acknowledge the sacrifices that talents make. The best sportsmen are paid the same as the mediocre ones or not paid at all. It is unjust and unfairly discriminates the time and effort put into this profession and undermines the system of fair, proportional wages. I'm going to be transiting on to my second point of substantive, on the legitimate role of the free market. And the thesis is that the free market is a true reflection of the value of sports, something that we seek to achieve through our yardstick. The premise for this is that free market dictates wages. And this is true because demand for certain services often dictates the wages paid, where the demand for certain sports, and even within that, certain talented sportsmen, often determines the sports revenue and hence the wages paid to these individuals. Let's look at Cristiano Ronaldo, bought for $80 million. This is proportional to the soccer industry, worth billions of dollars. Now juxtapose this to minor league football in America with an average wage of just $2,000. This reflects the value consumers put on the sport, where popular sports like football receive more patronage and people will pay to watch matches and purchase merchandise. This is similar to luxury goods like Rolex watches or the most skillful lawyers who are paid millions just for single cases. This is not an arbitrary value placed, but instead a reflection of how much people are willing to pay to these individuals. And this is acceptable and normal, as we recognize that there is a right to place a perception of what an individual is worth, just as how corporations have the right to place high wages to attract CEOs who are deemed to bring the most benefit to their corporations. Likewise, clubs have the right to pay the best athletes the large amounts of money to attract them because of the benefits they bring to their clubs. So what have we shown you today? We've shown you that in their case, they cannot stand and live in a society that we really live in today. Their case is completely unfeasible, it discriminates the large majority of society. We've shown you in converse that our case better protects the value of sport, better protects the ability for sportsmen to contribute to society. That's why we're proud to oppose.
Thank you very much for that speech, and we welcome the second speaker for the government to extend her case.
Dear audience, I am the second speaker of the proposition group, and I would like to first react to the arguments we just heard. So first of all, you said that we cannot say that all sportsmen have immortally high wages, but in the criteria we said that we don't talk about the sportsmen who don't have immortally high wages, just talk about them who have. So then you said that firemen we didn't say that firemen is doing the same amount. We just said that they do maybe a job for more valuable for the society. We didn't say that sport is not important. Of course it's important, but not as important as life-saving. But yes, sport is inspiring, but and it's for sometimes it's good for the youth to have a role model, but maybe sometimes they are not good role models, and not for that money which they have, they get. And you also said that. Sorry, no, thank you. And you also said that they are risking their lives. Well, and they have a lot of talent, but I think. For example, football players, they're playing on the field, and I think they don't risk their life. Maybe they risk their legs or arms or something, but they don't risk their lives as firemen, or they don't teach.
It's not information,
no, thank you. They don't teach the youth as a teacher does, or don't save life as doctors. And you also talked about that books. If we say that. Entertainment is, no thank you, that entertainment is not important, then we shouldn't have books or movies. We didn't say that entertainment is not important. Of course it's important, but not for that amount of money. The other argument we said is that lawyers and doctors has a bigger amount of money than professional football, where it's totally not true. You cannot say that in every country doctors earn more money than footballers, because, for example, in our country, in Hungary, doctors have not enough money as footballers. And so now I would like to go on our fourth step. Yes.
Prove to us why teaching or saving lives is inherently more important than entertainment.
Well, because teachers teaches the work leaders or the workers of tomorrow. And what was the other question? Doctors? Sorry. Teachers and what?
Saving of lives.
Saving lives, yes. Well, I think it's a moral question. What is more important, entertaining or life-saving? I think life-saving, but if you think entertaining, then I don't know. I think life-saving is much more important than entertaining, but of course entertaining is important, but not for that amount of money what footballers are getting. So now I would like to move on to our fourth and fifth argument. So as we said, sportsmen have a huge, the wages are immensely high, and So they have a lot of money, and money is power, as we all know. And maybe they don't have a high level of knowledge, so no, thank you, to use that kind of power they have on the media, on the youngsters, on everyone else. And they get the money not just because of their hard work and talent. They get the money from commercials, for trading that, no thank you, trading which is, so they are buying other football players. So I don't think that is because of the, just because of the talent and because of the fame and the power. So, so now moving to the fifth argument, which is highly related to the fourth. So people, I think, people value, or things. No,
Point of information.
No, thank you. That people value and idol these sportsmen too much because of their money, because of their power, because of their fame, and this sometimes or all times have a bad effect on youngsters. But I would like to say that we don't say that sport is not important. Of course, sport is important and playing sport is important, but not for that money what they are getting. And also, they are not always keeping a country together. They are cause conflict. Just a minute. They cause conflict with, like, for example, in Spain between Barcelona and Real Madrid. Yes.
The amount consumers pay for products is the amount of wages paid to these athletes. Prove to us why I don't have the right to pay for products to pay athletes.
Of course, you have the right to pay for whatever you want, but I don't think that. So sometimes then you cannot choose. You cannot choose if your government is paying for a sport, professional athlete. For example, they don't have the same taxes as normal people. I mean, so normal workers do. So the tax which you give in to the government pays. Not only for the important matters, it pays also for the football player, and I cannot choose whether I want to pay a football player or not, because I just give in the tax and the government does what it wants to do. So I would like to summarize the arguments I said. I said that money is power, and the professional footballer didn't use that power in a good way. So sometimes they have a bad effect on youngsters, and the youngsters want to be footballers rather than being doctors or teachers because of the fame and money, and of course playing sports. But would you play sports without any money? No, I don't think that anyone would want to be a professional footballer if they wouldn't give enough money for that. And of course, so this is why we think that people value them too much, and as well they don't do anything substantial. So, for example, a teacher does, a doctor does, and so they will remember them in the future. And they doing something for the society, but who will remember 100 years from now a footballer, for example, Cristiano Ronaldo? So, about our arguments, we think that the wages of professional football sportsmen are immorally high. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for that speech, and we continue with the second speaker for the side of the opposition.
We stand for paying sportsmen how much they're worth, and we think that only that can be called moral. And I'm going to address their arguments on two levels. Firstly, on the idea of morality, and secondly, on the new idea that the second speaker brought up about the effect on young people. So let me first talk about the idea of morality. And here's where they talked about how morality should be judged on whether a particular amount of money or particular wage is higher than average. Now this seems to imply that the only moral wage that you can have, or the only moral wage that you can have, is that if society all have the same wage. Now we don't think that that's moral precisely because of the fact that that doesn't recognize the amount of skill, the amount of talent, and the value that society places on particular jobs. So it's just not fair. And because it's not fair, that's what makes everyone having the same amount of money, the same amount of wages, immoral. Because we believe that individuals who possess a higher amount of skill, who work harder to achieve that skill, and who have a particular good or provide a particular service for society that it wants, that it needs, and that it demands, and that it values very highly, should therefore be paid more. That's the moral thing to do because it recognizes the skills that they have, the work that they put into it. That's meritocracy. And in most countries, we see that that is moral. But then they shifted on that and they said, no, morality should be about how much they contribute to society. Now, apart from the fact that that is contradicting the first idea that everyone should have the same amount of money, we don't think that contribution to society can ever really be, they never really quantified what this contribution is. They never really quantified that in their first speaker. Because we told you that in our first speaker, sportsmen contribute through entertainment. And society deems this entertainment as valuable. So is it not moral for them to be paid more by creating and producing a particular good that society values, that the entire society values, and contributes to making things like sports and major league sports, professional sports, multi-billion-dollar industries? The reason why these industries become so popular and become so famous and become such rich industries is precisely because of the fact that society places a higher level of value on them. So we don't think that that's immoral. In fact, even if it was immoral, I'm going to show you my substantive later how they actually do contribute to human values, human ideals, and human causes. But that's for my substantive. Then they talked about in the second speaker how they quantified what this contribution is, and they quantified that this contribution should be the ability to save life. Now we think that number one, this is irrelevant because it doesn't show why the wages of sportsmen in themselves are immoral. It's just comparing to other jobs and saying that because they're doing something which is not what these other jobs do, it is therefore immoral. So that's the first reason why that's irrelevant. But even then, we don't think it's true because it's an unfair value judgment. Because we see that even people like bankers keep money flowing to the economy and they earn more than average than other people. Wages are not just based on what you do in terms of how you save lives, they're based on how much skill is needed and how much society values them. And there's no reason why this isn't moral. In fact, morality isn't always about saving lives. We see that in most societies, morality is something which is constructed and determined by what society deems to be. We see this from the fact that legislation and laws actually differ from society to society and country to country. So even laws which talk about how you can save lives are things which are determined by society itself. For example, in some countries, if you see a person on the street who is dying and you don't save his life by calling 911, that's immoral, that is wrong, and you go to jail for that. But in other countries, witnesses are protected from doing that, and because if they choose not to save their life in order to protect themselves from other legal damages, that isn't considered immoral, that isn't considered wrong. So even this idea of saving life as an absolute idea of what is moral and what isn't immoral doesn't really stand. And we don't think that that's what wages should have to be based on entirely. But let me move on to this second idea about the effect on youth. And here they said that sports is something which corrupts youth because youth are only going to go into it for the money and the glory, and they're going to see people who are bad role models. Now, in the first case, we don't think that this is true because we think that sportsmen who are bad role models and actually do break laws are punished quite severely, and courts actually punish them more precisely because they are public figures in order to send a message to society. But on a second level, we think that sports is actually something which is good because it promotes human values, it promotes values like universal brotherhood, like the team spirit and sportsmanship. But even if that is the case, we see that young people and individuals often go into jobs for economic considerations, right? Because they want to make sure that they're able to support themselves, sustain themselves, and generally these jobs are considered more glamorous than others. We don't think there's anything wrong with that, we don't think there's anything immoral about that. If there was anything immoral about that, then it would be wrong for us to even have jobs that are glamorous or that people see to be better to go into. So we think that that entire idea doesn't really stand, doesn't really prove why wages for sportsmen are immoral. But I'm going to move on and transit to my substantive now. I'm going to be talking about empowering sports to promote human ideals. And this is really going to clash with the idea that sportsmen don't bring about any positive good to society. And the thesis of my argument is this: the wages that sportsmen receive are intimately tied to their recognition and influence, which allow them to become agents of positive change in society. Now, sports is an extremely visceral discipline. The nature of the field makes it very relatable to people on the ground. And that makes sportsmen highly influential. This is because certain sports evoke emotions of intense passion among fans. We saw that in the Cricket World Cup in 2011, where 437 million viewers worldwide tuned in to watch the World Cup. That's one of the highest television audiences in history. Another example would be how Barcelona Football Club has a stadium called Camp Nou with 99,534 seats. And this entire stadium has been completely filled for every match, hold on a moment, madam, in the 2011-2012 season.
So my question is that why should we pay them more because they have a lot of viewers on TV?
Madam, we think that society reserves the right to determine what it thinks is important, what services it thinks it wants to value more, and what industries it believes are more essential to it, and therefore place a higher value on it. That's the entire basis upon which our economy works. We think that if that is immoral, then it completely doesn't answer the question of how society should be able to decide for itself what is right and what is wrong, how it wants to spend its money, and what it wants to invest in. We think that it's immoral for you to place a value judgment that people who do not save lives shouldn't earn as much, even if they are even more talented, even if they work even harder than people who do, or even if they provide a service which is different from them. So we think it's immoral to place that kind of value judgment. But we think that professional sports, I'm moving back to my point now, actually engages deep emotions in the human psyche because of the way that people look at it. People see physical perfection, people see athleticism, and it appeals to fans' loyalties. That's why you have international competitions like the Olympics and the World Cup, having people travel from all around the world to support their country. And because of this kind of admiration for sports and individual sportsmen who are within the industry, it causes sports to be the perfect vehicle and the perfect industry to promote higher ideals of human progress. And that's why events like the Olympics promote values like universal brotherhood, tolerance, peace, and intercultural communication. And as highfalutin as that sounds, the publicity and the reach of sports in that way, the ability to reach many people, is really predicated, is really dependent on the fame and the influence of sportsmen and sporting organizations. In fact, the high wages that professional sportsmen receive actually contribute to their ability to become agents of this positive change and push these positive ideals forward. We see that it allows them to become popular icons precisely because their rich people admire them and look up to them, and it enables them to contribute to worthy causes. Let me give you two examples. Didier Drogba, the captain of the Ivory Coast team, has actually used his personal wealth to start the biggest charity in Ivory Coast to fund education for poor families. Another example would be Lance Armstrong, who has won 7 Tour de France competitions and has started the Live Strong Foundation to raise funds for cancer. So all these causes are sustained by the wealth of these sportsmen and the kind of wages and the kind of fame that they have because of that wealth as well. And we see that because of that, the wealth and the fame that they have is actually something which has contributed to their ability to make a positive change and transform sports from being solely an idea in the industry of entertainment to be one that people can look up to and one that makes a positive difference in society itself. We don't think it's immoral.
Thank you very much for that speech, and we continue with the third speaker for the side of the government.
Welcome everybody. First of all, I would like to mention that you said that government don't really pay these sportsmen, and we believe that we said that it's not true because they, in many countries, for example our country, sportsmen pay different taxes and lower taxes, especially compared to how huge wage they earn. And another thing is the education. For example, if we compare the education, for example, a teacher with a sportsman who earned very high wages, we can see that education is, for example, way more important. I can give you an example, for example, Japan. You can see it very clearly that education is way more important than, for example, many sportsmen behave.
Hi, sir.
Yes, sir.
So, Japan values education. If a certain country values sports, why can't they value it to that level of wages? The reason why education has such high value in Japan is because citizens recognize its importance. If people recognize the importance in sports, why can't you pay athletes high wages?
Of course they can, but we say that this is not fair in many cases. And we don't want to take away the right from people to pay for what they want to, and we just said that. But in many times, for example, you don't have connection with the sportsman, and you wouldn't like to support him, but from the tax you pay from the government pay back for the person, and yes, the government sometimes pay the sportsmen, not directly, but in different ways, for example, travel fees and different healthcare payment goods for these people. So, of course, they only entertain. We agree with this, and you have said that also. So that's all what they give our society. So, what we said that they don't do much for community purposes. So they only entertain and inspire rather than directly helping the community. And this is very important because we can see that there are many jobs, not only, for example, the doctors you have mentioned who save lives. So we don't want to highlight the doctors only, but for example, scientists and teachers. So their work and their job is could be way more important for you in your country. And they are directly helping for your society and usually work more. For example, when a sportsman who have, for example, 2 trainings a day, and that's all, and he earns a huge amount of money for that.
Fine, sir.
Yes, sir.
The reason your second speaker values education is because it shapes the future. Sportsmen who inspire individuals do the same thing.
I can see how with sportsmen.
It wasn't a question.
Yeah.
You can read this to reply.
First of all, it wasn't a question, but I don't really see the connection between this because sportsmen don't really affect so much the future than, for example, education. For example, in Japan, as you